everyone, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make ketchup. Let's get started. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to thoroughly wash your tomatoes because obviously your tomatoes could have some germs or something like that on them, and you don't want that to be in your ketchup. And even though you're going to boil it later, which will probably kill the germs, we want to make sure that your tomatoes are fine. So yeah, make sure you do that. One quick note is that you don't have to use big tomatoes. You could also use cherry ones. Any tomatoes will work. Just make sure it fills up your blender like 5 cups or something. So now what you're going to want to do is you're going to take a cutting table or a plate like I use and just cut up your tomatoes. Now, typically I don't do this, but I did this as a simpler way for you guys. Typically I just put the tomatoes as whole in the blender and just kind of take the knife and jab them in the, that sounds so violent, and just kind of jab them in the blender until they are done. Now, as you will see later on, these weren't small enough slices. So if you want to not like kind of fight with your blender later on, I highly recommend you cut your tomatoes like 3 slices per tomato, unless you're using cherry tomatoes. If you're using cherry tomatoes, you do not have to do this process at all. This is only if you're using bigger tomatoes. So now you're just going to want to take your sliced tomatoes and add them into the blender. Now you're going to need the pot that you are going to use and a strainer. Now that you have your pot and strainer, your strainer needing to be placed directly on top of the pan that you're using, you're going to want to take your tomato juice, because you just blended, I'm just going to call it tomato juice, and pour it through the strainer so it can go into the pot. This is what that process should look like. So now that you got the previous process done, you're going to take a big spoon, like I use a big soup spoon, or whatever else you really want, or that can push down through the strainer to get that tomato juice into the pot. And you're going to want to push down. What this does is it gets the seeds out of the ketchup. This is a lot easier than scooping them out of the tomatoes, but if you don't have a strainer and can't get one for whatever reason, like at your local store, what you can do is just scoop the seeds out of the tomatoes before you cut them, so you don't have to go through this process. But which one is quicker, faster, and simpler? This process 100%. But you always have the process I just talked about if you can't get a strainer or use this process for whatever reason. So here's a quick look at what your ketchup or tomato juice should look like at this point. It should have a water-like consistency and should be kind of pinkish red like this. So now you're going to want to take your pot filled with your tomato juice and put them on top of your stove, putting it on high. So now you're going to want to take a measuring cup, and some vinegar. Now, if you want it to be not spicy, your ketchup, add white distilled vinegar, but if you want it to be spicy, add apple cider vinegar. Make sure you add your vinegar once your tomato juice or ketchup is boiling. So now you are going to want to take your cup and add about 3/4 of sugar to your ketchup. As seen here, it is possible that your ketchup will try to overflow. So just take your spoon, like the one I'm using, make sure it is not like a regular spoon, and just stir it, and make sure that you turn the heat to low while adding the rest of the ingredients. So right here is a quick display of the rest of the ingredients you will need. You will need 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of onion powder, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper, 1/8 of ground or oregano, 1/8 celery seed, and 1/8 ground mustard. At this point, you're pretty much done. This is what your ketchup should look like at this point after thoroughly stirring. Now, as I'm about to show in a quick second, the time right after was 6:32 in the evening. Keep that in mind for later when you'll see around when the ketchup will be ready. So this is what your ketchup should look like when it's ready. At this point, it was about 7:20. Keep in mind, see how half of the ketchup is gone and it's in a weird clumpy consistency, plus it is mostly black. That is what it should look like when it is done. Now, if some of the ketchup starts to spit out like it did before with me, that is normal. So this is what the ketchup looked like at the end in a bowl. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Have a great day.